All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Rally Book Study. Um, so last week we finished, our walk through kind of like what we did is we hit bullet points from the title page on of, you know, how to, where it mentions working with another person. And this is our third week of that tonight, and we actually have 5 weeks all in all. But Um, tonight, we're done with that initial journey, and we're going to start the chapter that's devoted entirely to this 12-step working with others. And I um I am going to read from this from the Grapevine 1966, and it's Bill. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. This on a chill November afternoon in 1934, it was Ebby who had brought me the message that saved my life. Still more importantly, he was the bearer of the grace and of the principles that shortly afterwards led to my spiritual awakening. Just very poetic there. This was truly a call to a new life in the spirit. It was kind of rebirth that has since become the most precious possession of each and every one of us. Ebby had been paroled into the custody of friends who had achieved their sobriety in Oxford. We mentioned that. We told that story how Ebby goes to court and the Seabrook Graves' father was the judge and let them into their custody. That's what he's talking about. They brought Ebby to New York, where he fell under, then began influence of AA's great friend to be Dr. Sam Shoemaker, the rector of Calvary Episcopal Church. Much affected by Sam and the Oxford group, Ebby promptly sobered up. Hearing of my serious condition, he was straight away came to my house in Brooklyn. The vision of Ebby looking at me across the table became a wonderful view. As most of AAs know, he spoke to me from the release from hopelessness that had come to him as a result of the self-survey. I love that way he says that. Restitution, ongoing humbleness to others, and prayer. In short, he had possessed the attitudes and principles that I use to develop AA's 12 steps. Um, so let me read the rest of it really quick. Says it had happened. One alcoholic had effectively carried the message to another. Ebby had enabled to bring me the gift of grace because he could reach me in a depth that no one else could. So, Bill, there's several quotes with Bill that I love, and one of them is he said is a good sponsor is a mentor, a friend, and a sounding board. A bad one can mean the difference between life and death. I mean, he starts off very kind and saying what we do for others, but then he throws in life and death. And that's how important this is. Many forget, they get to the program, and well, I'm not gonna say the program, and they get to the fellowship, and the Toll mentions the sound, the feeling is tremendously exciting. Our social instinct gets fulfilled. We feel better. We're moving along. And then all of a sudden, the desperation we had when we walked in fades as we started to get those instincts fulfilled. I get the money, I get the girl, I get the job, and we forget we're there on a life and death errand. It's scary how quick that happens. Another great quote by Bill is our chief responsibility to the newcomer is the adequate presentation of the program recovery. And I always say, I read that at the beginning of every book that I do in the first week, because that I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, adequate presentation of the program recovery. And it's simply walking another person through the steps, that we have done, but out of this book, you know, and we're we helped, by one person with our struggles, and now we're going to walk someone else, or someone helps with our struggles. And, we all we're doing is putting a simple kid spiritual souls lay at their feet. It's very imperative to give them the message as you received it, not adding stuff you hear at this meeting and that meeting. What I mean is a lot of people, and I've seen this happen, They work with a sponsor one-on-one, and that could be me. So I'm giving my own experience here. I'll work with the guy and we'll do, let's just say we're up on getting step to 8. And the guy will say, hey, I'm gonna do this differently than we did it. And it kind of like makes me go, well, where'd you hear that? Or they start changing things as we go through. And that you gotta remember there's a wide avenue. That's why they call the internet, they used to call it, I don't think I've heard it in years, information superhighway, they called it, right? And there's a recovery superhighway on there now. I mean, there's so many. Back in the day, when I first got sober in 2000, I was listening to audio tapes, I mean cassettes. And people don't know the pain of that. When you heard a great thing, you had to rewind it and rewind it back. And, it's like, but I was given that stuff by my sponsor because it was similar to the way he taught me. And I didn't listen to that stuff so I could change the way we did it. So it's very important to, to stick to the formula you did. Because we're giving them a simple solution, not adding stuff, not change. We're not trying to water anything, we're not trying to water things down. We don't want to put the real alcoholic's life at risk, by any of that. And so, I mean, basically plain and simple, it's 12 steps to work. We must take others to the steps. Taking a person to the steps, call the step guide, call the sponsor, maybe just carrying the message. But if no one was doing any 12-step work, well, we wouldn't be kicking back here on a Thursday night. The program would simply cease to exist. The heartbeat would be gone. The heartbeat of the program is working with other people. Without the service work, and also the service work with those who came before us. And I'm just gonna throw this out really quick. I'm just as this kick in my head because I told this guy the story today. I met let me backtrack a little bit. The first time I heard this message was in '96. I went to an A meeting. It was a book study, and it was an old Pleasant Hill High School, which is old abandoned, not abandoned, but now it's adult ed. But they had a huge gymnasium in there, and I walked in there. It was all multi-use room. It was filled with chairs and 150 people in there. And I walked in there, and there's theater sitting. And go, that's not a meeting. And I go, just get in there and listen. And these guys broke down the steps. Well, that night, I never heard of that stuff before, and I got a big book sponsor. I did the first 3 steps, and when I did the night I did the 3rd step prayer, I drank again. I just wasn't ready, but I knew where to go when I got back, and I got one of those guys, and I met him the first time we met one-on-one was in this local pizza joint, and I remember he asked me to explain him what recovery was, and I'll excuse my French, but what he said was, after I explained recovery was, he goes, "You don't know shit." He basically told me, he goes, "You don't know anything." And I sat there, but I didn't get mad because I was willing to do anything at that point. I was so tired. And he asked me, to, throw everything away I think I know. Start new, forget everything you learned. How many times have you been to rehab? I said 7 times. He said, forget all that stuff. And he let me have a brand new experience. And he didn't give me any hard rules to follow, just deep desire to do the steps. And he was just another member of AA, whose job it was to guide another through the program of recovery. And at the same time, be a model of what truly being sober was. And also a sane, sound human being, which I haven't been around a lot of them before. But, he was different than your average AAer, very different than most sponsors I had who attempted me to take me to the steps. Because, I'm not like that one guy, I don't even know if I consider him a sponsor, because the first 3 steps, but this guy's a hardcore book thumper. And I had, that one guy I mentioned a minute ago, that was it. But I was super intrigued by this man because I was desperate. And he told me to pray and do the 3rd step prayer every day, even though as soon as we met. He goes, I want you to memorize this. All these things he gave me. But he gave me a level of love as he heard my story. He broke down the steps with this precise direction. the way, the book, he would keep referring to the book. It just blew my mind. How can this guy know this so well? Is there like pictures up on the wall somewhere he's reading off of in the background? But he introduced me to a real solution and road to happiness of joy and freedom I never had before. And I kept thinking, I grew up in a Catholic home. I used to have to go to Bible studies and stuff. And once in a while, you get people that knew the Bible like second nature. And that's what he reminded me of. So at the same time, I was intrigued, but scared the crap out of me. But he gave me life-changing feedback in step 5. And after that, I mean, it was on. And, he went with me to make my most difficult amends. And I mentioned, he asked me, I mentioned this last week, he asked me a life-changing question before the 5th step. He said, how good are you on your word? And I said, oh, very good, which was a lie. He said, if I take you through these steps, we do the same for another person. And I say this to all the time. My message when I share it was the longest promise I've ever kept. And I broke a lot of promises over the years. And I credit that first sponsor I had, of changing me, changing my life. And that lifeline he gave me was the steps. It was the first time in my life I tried following someone else's ideas and plans. And that's what it takes. But he not not only helped me, through the steps, he showed me how to sponsor in the big book by doing, so I could, help other people. And I mean, so as you know, I mean, I'm a big book, I guess I call myself a big book fundamentalist, so to speak. I do the steps like a recipe. I practice closer to outline the big book Alcoholics Anonymous as precise as the first 100 did it, the best of my ability. I know when I follow those instructions outlined in the book, it awakens my mind and keeps me in conscious contact with my higher power. And one of the focuses in sponsorship in doing book studies is to teach others how to teach. And that's one thing I love to do. That's why I get really into this part of the book. And how to do the program is outlined in the big book. I mean, meetings are filled with so many suffering, untreated alcoholics. I say it's untreated alcoholism, when I hear them getting crazy and stuff. But I rest easy knowing that the fellowship has maybe one more teacher out there I can put out there. But at the same time as I could say I'm respected in AA, but I've been called a step Nazi, a book thumper, a holy roller. I mean, some guy called me a steptard. Um, one guy said, you live in your big book, and you sleep at that night, blah, 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 and been called arrogant and been asked, people get arrogance and passion mixed up so easy. And I've been asked not to bring my big book to meetings and been, physically and verbally threatened by AA members just by bringing the steps. And I told one of them, I said, listen, he called me a step Nazi. I said, listen, the Nazis burn books. I'm just trying to get to read one. And that's what I said to him. And the guys looked at me like, but, I do not change. I'm never change who I am because over the years I've witnessed the fellowship grow up around me. That's the thing. And I've watched the spirit grow around me. And some of those who came on for, I guess what I'm saying is some people, ask me like I've taken guys through the steps and watched a 180-degree turn and then help others. And that's a fascinating part to be around. But the truth is we will never truly have a relationship with the higher powers and until we go through the steps. And I'm a firm believer you'll never understand this with 100%. So the key to permanent recovery is not being sponsored, is sponsoring others. So let's go to, we're gonna start off on page 88. And you know, and he says, hold on a second. Oh yeah, he says, we alcoholics are undisciplined. Oh, so we're right before the chapter, the last page of the one. It says, we alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God, there's that word again, let God, it says in this book a lot, let God discipline us in a simple way we just outlined. And that's the 11th step. I read this a few weeks back, but I like to say this again because it falls right in there. It says, but that is not all. So there's action and more action. Every time when we expect him to say, okay, now live your life and put your feet up, he says, more action, more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to the 12 steps. So faith without works is dead. We've heard it before in 14, 76, now 88. Faith without action is dead. It's what steps are all about. We take action. You can't get anything done without action. You can't stare at the mirror and expect to lose weight. You can't expect to have muscles and not go to the gym. You gotta. This is about spiritual fitness, though. If you truly want to be spiritually fit, you must take the action. Without that action, absolutely nothing changes. If nothing changes, nothing changes. You can't have faith without it. So, I always say the steps. You know, faith without works is alive. I mean, faith with works is alive. So the steps make faith come alive. That's the way I look at it. And before we get into working with others, I'm going to read a few paragraphs. And if you have the book, you can follow along. But it's Emmett Fox's book, Sermon on the Mount. A lot of people don't have it, so just follow along. But I want to read this. That this book is a huge influence on early AA. It's got a slight Christian slant to it with its focus. It's focused on metaphysics, which metaphysics is a study of existence and reality, the truth of who you are, kind of like knowing. It's like I always say that the truth of who you are, why you are here, and what is your purpose. Kind of like what am I, who am I, why am I here type stuff. And it's basically philosophical science, if you want to say it in that sense. This is a study of knowing and consciousness, but it's explained with using logic and reason. So, in this time when this book was written in the 20s, I don't have the exact date, but you didn't have a lot of people getting there. They would speak of the ways you got to have this and you got to have God, but no one gave you the roadmap to it. And that's what Emmett Fox's purpose was. That's what metaphysics will give you. This part of this book really stuck to me because it talks about how to approach others once you become awakened. Now, he's not talking about approaching alcoholics, but it's same idea. So you can see the influence of the big book in here. So we're on 103 of Sermon on the Mount, not big book, Sermon on the Mount. It says, when people first become possessed of knowledge of the truth, so we'll say awakened, they are set from oppressing difficulty. That's, we can say that's, recovered, set free. They are so overjoyed, they go running about pouring out their discovery to others, and some of us have done that, and urging them to accept the truth too. We've done that. Hey, you gotta stop drinking. It's entirely unstable that this should happen. I mean, I'm sorry, understandable this should happen. I love this line here. For love longs to share its good. Love longs to share its good, but nevertheless, it's very unwise. And this is very important. The fact is that the acceptance of truth, or of awakening, whatever you want to call it, involves, as we have seen, the scrapping of all old standards, kind of like doing the steps. And after all, this is a tremendous thing to expect from anyone. It can only happen in any case when people are spiritually ready for the change. If one is spiritually ready, they will be glad to accept truth. If they are not, no amount of intelligent discussion or argument will make them so. Very important right there. No amount of intelligent discussion or argument will change their mind. So self-explanatory. When we have an awakening, we want to run around and tell everybody, or even when some people get sober. But he's saying here, it's unwise that we run around unless the person is ready to hear it. There's an old saying, when one is ready, everything we say is right. And when they're not ready, everything we say is wrong. That's just the way it works. So we're gonna go to the next paragraph on that book. More important stuff here. Never rely upon your own judgment to say who is ready for the truth and who is not. But rely for guidance upon the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, the Spirit within us. Most of us have had the experience when we first realized this spiritual idea, what it means, of picking out certain of our friends who we felt for sure would jump at it, only to find out in most cases they refused it. One on the other hand, several people who whom our foolish mind chose to regard as being unspiritual accepted it gladly and had great success. He's telling us that we need to use guidance from God to know who is ready and who's not. We look within. And you can tell. But most importantly, he says that the person we thought would jump for us, it doesn't. But that one person we thought, oh, I don't know if he would be into this is. So, you know, the next one's pretty cool too. He says, if you are praying regularly, every day for wisdom, intelligence, and fresh opportunities for service, the right people will be brought to you, or will be brought to or you will be brought to them. And a convenient occasion will provide for the subject to be introduced. Now, a lot of people here at Sponsor have hit dry spells before. And when we hit dry spells, what happens is within those dry spells, sometimes we'll pray for sponsees or focus, and all of a sudden it's happened to me for I got 11 like within a week one time. It's never happened since then, that many, but it happens. So sometimes you bring back the focus, and maybe there's something in us that's not bringing people to us. But look at this. This is the last paragraph from that book. The quickest way to spread the truth is by living the life yourself. The quickest way to spread the truth is living life yourself. Then most people will notice the change in you as they see improved, healthy prosperity in your life and happiness shining on your face. They will come around on their own accord, begging for you to share your secret. It's a beautiful way it says we don't need to run around and have a billboard saying, I'm spiritually awake. There's a famous saying is, preach the gospel and occasionally use words, or preach the steps, but occasionally use words. You know, it's the law of aura, what they're talking about there, you know. And so I think those paragraphs are really good setup for the flavor Bill kind of presents here and working with others. Um, so the chapter is called Working with Others. It doesn't mean that's all the information of sponsoring is found in this book. And people will say, well, it's this all these pages, it only talks about how to approach the person and this and that. And it says, where's the rest of the blueprint, how to sponsor? It's in the rest of the book. All the directions are there. We're explaining them to someone else. But this chapter gets all the information how to work one-on-one with a guy for the first few times. Very important. So it starts off actually with on 89 with some 12-step promises. And it says practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intense work with other alcoholics. So what he's getting at here is practical experience shows that nothing guarantees immunity, and that's natural as that, natural resistance against a disease, let's just say. That's what immunity is, natural resistance against a disease. He says from drinking, or you could cross out drinking, put thinking in there. Put thinking in there instead of drinking. As intense work with other alcoholics. For me, it's not about the drinking anymore, it's about the thinking. If I go work with someone, my mind's not thinking about my bills and all that stuff, right? Look what it says next. And it's so right on. It works when other activities fail. How many things have you, for those who sponsored in here, how many things have failed where you try to get things done and you go sponsor with someone, and it brings you right back in. Same way, for me, it's like I'll do inventory, look at some stuff, and I sponsor and this is where I'm supposed to be all along. He says, this is our 12th suggestion, carry the message to alcoholics. Always, it's always about the messenger. It's when we say I don't want to say it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. It's very important. A lot of people get caught up being the messenger. We don't want to be the holier than thou or the soapbox guy. It's about the message, not so it's not about the messenger. It's about if I'm just want to sponsor and I don't have the message. One of my friends uh, robbed a pharmacy years ago, and he's a book thumper guy doing book studies. He robbed a pharmacy and did the slowest high-speed chase in the history of the Bay Area, and went to the farm right next to the rehab where we've done book studies in the past. I wasn't around this time, but the guy's name was Earl that got popped, and his sponsor was Don, and Don was doing a book study. And if you look through the window, you could see the farm. And one night, everyone there was devastated because Earl was a volunteer at the ranch, DVR. And of course, they're shocked that one of their volunteers relapsed and did that in one weekend. And Don was sitting there talking about the difference between the messenger and the message. And he says, remember, and he opened up the curtain and he pointed right to the jail. And he says, it's about the message and not the messenger. Very powerful. The point he's trying to make is, look what it says: you can help and else can. You can share their confidence, others fail. Remember, he reminds us here, remember, they are very ill. So, it's pretty deep words. We have to remember what ill means. It means unsound health, mind, body, spirit, right? It's not the first time he uses the words, describe a sick person. This time he wants to remind us, when we're working with another, this person is sick. Sometimes we gotta calm ourselves down a little bit. And the way I sponsor is I'm gonna have the guy read Doctor's Pain on his own and then quiz him and see exactly how deep this guy goes and how he retains stuff, right? How much they know and where they're at, and how much I'm gonna have to walk hand to hand with this guy. I'm not a line by line sponsor. I'll do that with them, but I hit bullet points, and I'll be doing those bullet points in a few weeks. But he says life will take on a new meaning to watch people recover. And he just said that ill health, unsound health is what they have. And now he says watch people recover. It's just he goes from ill health to recover. It's pretty deep. Life will take on a new meaning to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends, that not fair weather friends, a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. You will not miss this. Frequent contact with newcomers, with each other is bright to our lives. I want to tell you something right here. If you go to a meeting and you're at I love meetings. I'm not knocking meetings, but I'm going to say this. You got a book study discussion in a meeting, and someone that's never done the steps will read this paragraph, and they think they're talking about the meetings. Life will take on a new meaning to watch people recover, like the people in the meeting, right? To watch, to watch the loneliness vanish. They're not talking about the people you're looking at the meetings here. And especially see a fellowship grow about you. Talking about the people you sponsor. Frequent contact with newcomers, with each other, bright spot of our lives. If people see that, they take it that way. I mean, the bright spot of our life. A person told me 20 years ago, the bright spot of your life will be sitting, in my office for 5 hours hearing someone's, fifth step, person's story. I would go, hell, you're crazy. I couldn't sit for 5 minutes. My whole life my motives were always, I need to get what I needed, and I don't care how I get it. I had no interest in, and I mentioned this before, I have zero interest in other people. Zero, none. And once I did these steps, once I get to step 12, especially once I go from 4 to 9 and 10 to 12, life just takes on a whole different, new purpose, new direction. If you don't want new purpose and new direction, then just skip the steps. If you want to stay where you are. Because new is something you've never experienced before. A lot of people aren't ready for that. And that new that we receive is being selfless thinking, mostly concerned with the needs of others rather than my own. And we go from selfish, where we're mostly concerned with the needs of myself and not others. But if you want, I always tell guys this: if you want to live the best life you can possibly live, take it through the steps. And, I'm a firm believer now. I know that one of the most important things in life is to be useful and helpful to other people, even beyond sponsorship. When I see in this book helping the person, does not necessarily mean sponsorship. It can be anything, but sponsorship means I'm carrying on what this program's asked me to do in the 12 step, and it's not going to be complete until I do. But anyone can be great. I heard this quote years ago. Anyone can be great because anyone can help another person. But we offer our time to guide people through the steps, you know. And so, when this book was written, I want to explain this. And it came out in 39, it was written around 37, 38. There were a few meetings, there was no treatment centers that like we have today. Um, there's a few drying out places, they call them. They had the Inebra asylums I talked about were long gone, and basically there's just insane asylums now, but people have drifted down. Inebra asylums were places that were opened up in the 1800s, and they were lasted about 40 years, and they were for alcoholics, and they didn't have the same. See, during the late 1800s, if you went into a mental institution, they had rights for alcoholics, like they couldn't give them lobotomies and shock therapy and all this stuff. Where the Niebuhr they did, they thought they could cure them, and they made that inhumane. But a lot of people, those were closed down in the early 20s. A lot of people were still from those systems were still in the insane asylums, and a lot of them were damaged from the systems. But these locked away and throw away the key was a treatment. But because of the hopeless nature of alcoholism, very few hospitals treated alcoholics. So it was very hard to find a place. It's talking 1939, a place um, to do that. Meaning early A members were on their own trying to find people to work with. They could go to a hospital, they could go to an asylum, you know, if they could get in those places. Now it was very hard to get in the hospitals. You couldn't just go to the front desk of the hospital and go, "Where's the alcoholics?" Because they weren't allowed in there. Dr. Bob's sneaking guys in there with gastritis and stuff so they could treat them. Asylums aren't gonna let, I'm an alcoholic, I want to work with another alcoholic who's in here. They're gonna go, "Oh yeah, right." But some people had ways to get in those places. Um, one place they could show up was the courthouse, as we read earlier. You know, like what happened with Roland getting Ebby, and you get paroled you're gonna volunteer yourself to take this person home and work with them. Another way they found people to work with was it refers to by a family or friend. Um, because of that, wives were really involved in their husband's recovery from talking to the sponsor about them. You would talk to the wives first. They would go to meetings together. The wives would go, in a lot of places they would go to houses, wives go in one room, the husbands go in another room. And so the sponsors form a relationship with the wives. When they speak in this chapter about interacting with the family and wives, it was very different in those days. Today, they're at meetings, they're at rehabs, they're at detoxes. We know why they're there, right? We don't have to talk to the wives. We might get in a relationship with the wives. It usually happens after they, made amends, done the steps. I get invited over for dinner or something like that. But it's not that like they're talking about here. But I've found it more dangerous to form a relationship with wives when a guy is struggling, because then the wife feels the need to call you up and tell on them, and then you say, "Oh, okay, I'll talk to them about it," and then they're like mad at you for talking to them, and it's just not a way to go. Um, I was warned about that many years ago. I did experience that with one guy. Um, so I'm bringing this up because the next few chapters, like again, they're going to refer to the wives and family members. If I don't mention what we read or breeze through, it's because it's not as relevant as today. So back to 89. Perhaps you're not. Hold on a second. Perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, hospitals. They will not only be glad to assist you. I mean, I always ask around. But I don't go to those people. I have connections to rehabs everywhere. I prefer going to rehabs because that do the steps because they're not going anywhere. Um, but here's some good advice. Don't start off as an evangelist or reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. So an evangelist is described a Christian who spreads the word of Christianity using gospel to convert others to Christianity. A reformer is a person who advocates change and pushes change hard. First off, we we don't want to come across as an evangelist, but in these days, and someone mentioned God, that's what you're thought of as. So you'd be very careful. These early members, would be very careful. The ones that weren't necessarily Christian, but found the universalistic spirituality through the steps, had to be very careful of the wordings they use, because some people would, when they especially working with a new guy, they'd write you off right away. When working with another, we don't need to over promote the big book or sell the ideas. Let the big book do the talking. Look what it says next. It says ministers and doctors are competent and you can learn much from them if you wish. I love that. If you wish. But it happens, but if that happens because your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. One thing I want to say is reason the difference between that is, and it mentions if you can't have someone hear your fifth step, go to a minister and all that. And that was written there because of Paige is in Canada and she wants to get sober. She might be the only person in Canada, right? And but this is different right here, is same idea. But a minister and doctor, if I go talk to them, they don't understand the alcoholism from actual experience, the theology of obsession. And they just don't understand it. They don't know the allergy obsession. It'd be like me going and talk to my dad about it or something. So it's best to not always go to another alcoholic. Plus, the way I was like, someone had told me years ago, and it took me years to understand this, but they say don't change an alcoholic by going somewhere else, you know. But or 90. When you discover a prospect, there's that word prospect again. It describes the prospects. A prospect, you see someone that, maybe this guy is someone that I can really help. Possibility, right? A good word for that is, prospect is also a viewpoint. You see something, but Prospect Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can do, all you can do about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, look at this. It didn't say, if he doesn't want to stop drinking, tell him he must. No, it said, don't waste your time trying to persuade him. Here's why. You may spoil future opportunity. That word, spoil future opportunity, is big, because every time, like my relative of mine was been struggling with drinking and using, and I wanted to go tell this person, they wanted me to go talk to them, and I said, oh, they'll come to me, and I don't want to come to them when they're not ready and spoil that opportunity. So like when I meet a person for the first time, I talk to them for a few minutes, and he says, if he says, I don't want to do anything with you, or being sober, I'm cool being sober. I don't say, listen, you damn drunk, look at yourself, you gotta do these steps. No, I don't. Because I don't want to, that's the wrong approach. I don't want to, wreck a future opportunity. You say, thanks, here's my card. So I have business cards on my thing in front of you. I have business cards that just say how Big Book will travel on it. And I have my phone number. And I've given thousands of those cards out. And once in a while, I'll get a phone message from a guy late in the middle of the night. You gave me the Big Book card, right? And just hang up the phone. But once in a while, I get people in the middle of the day calling me and say, hey, man, you gave me a card a couple years ago, and I want your help from you. I was going through my wallet today, and I found it. And it's like, you never know. I get out thousands of those cards, though. But, if I was a jerk on my first approach or any time during sponsoring, I destroy any chance of that person coming back if they relapse or want to do the steps again. I mean, want to do the steps the first time, you know? And what I mean by that, I have a lot of sponsees that have struggled greatly with the program and relapse. And I see it coming before they do. It's natural to see that. It's not my place to say I might warn them, they need, buckle down a little bit, but I don't get mad at them for relapsing. I don't go hunt them down and kick in their door. I don't call them on the phone. I don't chase them. I may spoil future opportunity. I have a lot of sponsees that come back, and I guarantee you, some of the ones that I sponsor will say, "Man, that's one thing." I had a group of when I got 20 years, my wife gave me like a party here and all brought a bunch of old sponsees over and people I hadn't seen in years, and they all said, how what got me the most was when they all said, "I never gave up on any of them." And I don't think about that. That's not my aim, but that's just the way I am. That's what we do. You know, we Since this advice is given for the family also, they should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a very sick person. That's what we're dealing with, right? A very sick person. If there is any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. Um, get an idea of his behaviors, his problems, and his backgrounds, the seriousness of his condition. I want to let that person in. I don't recognize the name. Seriousness of his condition and his religious earnings. Um, you may need this information to put yourself in his place to see how you would like him to approach. And sometimes it is wise to wait till they go on a binge. The family may object to this, and usually do because they don't understand. But unless he is in a dangerous physical condition, it is better to risk it. Don't deal with him. He is very drunk. The saying is, people will go out and you need to have, just go out and drink, dude. I don't say that, but people say it at meetings all the time. But it says, unless he's very ugly and the family needs your help, wait for the end of a spree, or at least the lucid interval. So what they're saying here is that we need to wait till he goes out and gets drunk. And that sounds kind of harsh, but the guy's an alcoholic and he's like, I can't do this. I'm not ready for this. They go back to, I call experiment number one. So what's experiment number one? Let's go back to hold this spot in the book and go back to 31 really quick. Page 31. This is what I call experiment number one. Now this can go for alcohol. Remember, the big book contains open anybody. So this is for alcohol, crack, meth, sex, whatever it is. It says we do not on that page. We're not like to pronounce any individual alcoholic or addict, whatever, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over nearest bar room or crack house. I mean, try some controlled drinking or some controlled smoke, whatever it is. Try to stop. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take you long. It will not take long for you to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. And may be worth a bad case of jitters to get full knowledge of your condition. That happens a lot. Do not chase after them if they do, because they have to go do it. And, no one does it to go do it. What I mean is no one's going to go, I need to go drink and see if I got this disease. They go out and get full knowledge of their condition. It's not their plan to get that full knowledge of their condition. I always tell, I've had sponsored many guys. Well, I don't consider anyone a sponsor until I get them to past the fifth step. But the guys I'm taking through the initial steps, um, a lot of them I'll say they come back and they got on my book studies a lot, but never really done 4 through 9. And they say, I went out and I realized what I am. I go, congratulations, you took experiment number one. And that's what they're talking about when they say, We got to wait for them to go on a bench. We need them to get full knowledge of their condition. And they come back broken and begging, right? Let's go back to 90. Says, then let his family or friend ask him if he wants to quit for good. That's what I ask him. If he would go to any extreme, I could say any lengths. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. So when they say yes, gloves are off. I mean, you can sit there and start laying how you got recovered and what you did. It says you should ascribe to him as one of the fellowship, as part of their recovery. Try to help others who will be glad to help him if he cares to see you. So you explain to them, you're a guy that's done these steps, and I'm here to help you. And you know, I gotta mention this is, you see on TV like these interventions with the family to show interventions, and if they work, if they're not real alcoholics. If they're alcoholics, those interventions rarely work. And most of all, they're a waste of time because they're not ready. I usually ask him, have you heard of Alcoholics Anonymous? And what I mean by those interventions is it's like, if they're not ready, but ask them to remember if they ever heard of AA. I get a lot of guys that never heard of it at all. I had a guy that was 67 years old, first time quitting drinking, never even heard of AA, never even heard of the steps. Drank since he was 12. You know, but I get to see what he knows and what I'm dealing with that way. And it says, back to the book, it says, if he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. Neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him about you. So, don't text him, don't drive by their house, the sponsee I'm talking about. A lot of people are like, I've been texting this guy all night, they'll say, sponsees of mine. Why are you doing that? They want to talk to you, they would. So don't drive by their house and see if their lights are on, or knock on their door, or don't piss them off. You spoil a future opportunity. You know, I know we get excited with the first sponsees and we really want to make it work, but sometimes we want it more than they do, and that can be dangerous. But you have to take in mind they're a real alcoholic and they get caught up in that cycle. You're just another person in their way. Remember, they're like human power. That means if their own power does not work, how yours will not work as well. We're not, prophets, whatever you want to call it. Says they should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. Like I just said, you might place this book where he can see it in his interview. Here are no specific rule be given. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to go over anxious, for they might spoil matters. Usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach to a doctor or institution is a better bet. Kind of like what they're talking about now. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he is violent. Let the doctor, if you will, tell him he has something in the way of solution. That's why I love sponsoring guys in rehabs, because they're there. There's nothing interfering with me. They detoxed already. There's nothing really left for them to do with this stuff. Now, if a sponsor of mine relapses, family will call me up and say, you got to help him. You know what I say to them? I call the guy up on the phone if I think I need to, and say, hey, or they call me. I go, what detox do you want to go to? Oh, I'm not ready for that. And I say, well, call me when you're ready. Because if he says no, what the hell am I going to do? Nothing. Let's check out this is when your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of the first discussion. Under these conditions, your prospect will see is under no pressure. He will feel, he will feel he can deal without being nagged by the family. Call on him while he's still jittery. He may be more receptive than depressed. I think anyone is more receptive when they're down and out. Mhm. See your man alone if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn this and talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him, though, ab- about your drinking habits, allergy obsession, and experiences to encourage him to speak for himself. So you speak through the language of the allergy obsession. And you don't say, man, I picked up, I used to drive my car through trailer parks and take out buildings. That's what they're talking about. You say, I put alcohol in my body. And even though I didn't want to do it, I did. And you're describing the obsession. And you say, I put my body, I couldn't stop. You're describing an allergy. You speak to that language. You're teaching them a new way. They hear from actual experience. Look, it says, if he wishes to talk, let him do so. You will thus get a better idea how you might ought to proceed. As I mentioned earlier, you get to know the person. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your own drinking career up to the time you quit. The allergy obsession stuff, right? But say nothing for the moment how that was accomplished. You're not go, and then I found God, and they go, oh my God, they scare them, they'll run away. If he is a serious mood dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you. So so if he's serious, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you. The unmanageability. Be careful not to moralize or lecture. If the mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. See, some of those funny stories too. Get him to tell you some of his, break the ice. So when I sit down with a sponsee the first time, I usually just let them talk, kind of like get to know you a little bit. Where they came from, what's their drug of choice, how they drank, whatever. You know, Sometimes they go on and on and on, but I give them that time to talk. And once I feel he's comfortable, I talk about my past. I really lay it down and make it ugly, the ugly truth. Like it's like an icebreaker. And then I talk about that I overcame it. Um, I'm gonna keep work with the page you're on right here, put your finger on it, and then we're gonna jump to 112. And in that chapter, it has some good sponsorship advice, believe it or not. We're in the very bottom of 112. Um, it says, show him your copy of this book and tell him what you have found out about alcoholism. So you picture you're there with your book and you start showing him the book. Show him that as alcoholics, the writers of this book understand. So you're giving a little info on Bill and stuff. Tell him some of the interesting stories you have read. So you're telling him why you love the big book and why we're using it. If you think he will be shy on the spiritual remedy, ask him to look at the chapter on alcoholism. Then perhaps he'll be interested enough in the outcome. If he is energetic, your cooperation will mean a great deal. If he is lukewarm or thinks he is not alcoholic, we suggest to leave him alone. And there's that suggestion again, leave him alone. Avoid urging him to follow our program. The seed has been planted in his mind. Never underestimate the power of a seed. I've taken guys to the steps and like, oh, there's no way I can do this stuff. And they come back and you plant the seed. That's why they come back. The power of the seed. When the seed is planted, you let the seed do the rest. You don't smash the seed by chasing him. Go back to 91. Very important information there, though. Very good stuff. It says, when he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as alcoholic. We were mentioning that allergy obsession, right? Tell him how baffled you once were, right? How you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. Talking about the obsession, strange mental blank spots. They don't want to call them triggers. I don't like that word. It says um, says we suggest that you do this as I'm sorry, we suggest you do this as we have done the chapter on alcoholism. He's talking about chapter more alcoholism and how they have stories. They're telling him to speak from that style. And so it's very important to go to book studies and study the book so you can speak the book too. So here's the condition. If he's alcoholic, so this are saying here, now listen, if he's alcoholic, he will understand you at once. So what does it mean if he's not alcoholic? He's not going to understand anything you say about the allergy obsession because he's never had it. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own, you know. So he will understand you at once by speaking the language of doctor's opinion, the allergy obsession, and what that's me stuff, you know. And you want to have that deep first step experience, sponsor to sponsor, sponsee to sponsor moments. If you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopelessness of the malady. I wish they discussed hopelessness of the malady at meetings. I really wish they did. To show him from your own experience how the queer mental conditions surrounding the first drink prevents you from normal functioning of willpower to obsession. Don't at that stage refer to this book unless he has seen it or wishes to discuss it. They kind of go backwards there a little bit, but he's saying another way there. And to be careful not to brand him as alcoholic. We mentioned that a minute ago. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him he possibly can if he is not too alcoholic. But insist if he is severely affected with alcoholic, there's a little chance of your recovery. And if the guy asks me, brand new, and says, is there a chance I can beat this on my own? I say no. Continue to speak from alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of the mind and the body, body and mind with accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who have never realized their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole truth unless it will serve a good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. Very important. You got the ammo. That's right. You know, there's one thing no one else has offered this person, that solution. They probably hear it for the first time. You will soon have your friend admitting he has, if not, he has many, if not all, of the traits of an alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he's alcoholic, so much the better. Even, now use a different word to describe him, even though your protege may not have had entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know why, to know how you got well. So now they're starting to, this guy's talking about an allergy obsession. It sounds like death, but he's sitting here in front of me. And they say, when he's curious, let him ask that question, if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you and stress on it freely, really hard. Tell him what happened, you do the steps, blah, blah, blah. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree on your conception of God. He can choose his own conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. There it is. So always when a guy gives me his own conception of God, I go explain it to me. And he goes, so does that make sense to you? And I go, yeah. They're not just saying it. The main thing is that he'd be willing to believe in the power greater than himself and live on spiritual principles. So explaining step 2, this is why we use the big book, because it explains choose your own conception of God. It's very important. We're not there to convert them to what we believe in, right? I mean, there's a lot of Christians that are sponsors, and a very good Christian sponsor, you may not even know they're Christians until you get maybe even into the 12th step. You know, I've seen it happen a lot. I know Christian sponsors that tell guys right away, and it's very intimidating to them. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. This is no use for arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't arise any issues, no matter what your own conceptions are. So, to avoid that, always use page 55. So the next part here, we kind of close with this part. It's awesome. And I love this because when I read it, and I started understanding it. I read it the first time, it wasn't sponsoring, and it kind of blew by me. And I sponsored, and I went, oh, this happens a lot. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. Now, I grew up religious. I'm still religious in many aspects, but your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. He might be the minister's son. His education and training may be far superior than yours. So he knows the Bible inside out, let's just say. We use that as an example. In that case, he's going to wonder, sometimes arrogantly, going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. Right? And I said the minister's son, the guy grew up in religion, and they use that to hide behind. And they'll quote the Bible even though they don't know how to get to that part in, in spirituality. But he will be curious, so there's a curiosity to get, but he'll be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours will work so well. They're sitting there going, wait a minute, this guy doesn't know what I know, and I know the Bible better than he does, but how come I'm sitting here and he's sober? Just your presence is speaking out the spiritual life begins to make him question his own beliefs, and why he can't beat this on his own. Very powerful. He may be an example. I would underline all this stuff. He may be an example of the truth alone that faith is insufficient to be vital. This is very important right here. Most important thing I read the whole night. To be vital. Vital means essential. Think of vital signs in the hospital. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish, that's step 12, restrictive action 4 through 9. So for faith to be vital, you must do 4 through 9, step 12. I mean, 10, 11 are givens because 10 is 4 through 9, 11 is, so faith without works is dead, right? And look at this. Let him see you're not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more than you do. That's what I say to them. But calls attention. Here's the one that gets them. It's vitally important, and it's tough love. But called his attention the fact, however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not apply it or he would not have drank. Boom. Straight to the point, and you can have all the faith, knowledge of faith and information that's in the Bible or the big book. You put the big book here. You put, forget that maybe some guy knows the big book more than you do. But he calls attention, you cannot apply it, otherwise you're not drink. How many people we know drank that were great sponsors? Because they're not applying it, they stopped applying it, right? You can be a great church member, maybe even a priest or pastor. Those guys with funny collars, they're at meetings too. But you could, have not applied those beliefs, or you will not drink. All it goes to, like I said, to the big book as well. It tells me just being a part of a religion or a spiritual group on its own, you're not going to beat this. I need the steps. Go to page 27 real quick. And this is Carl Jung talking to the dude. He says, remember the guy, he goes, you need a spiritual experience. And he says, yes, probably doctor, there's exceptions to cases yours having such early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomenal. They appear to be the nature of huge emotional displacement, rearrangements, ideas, emotions, attitudes, which once a guiding force of life, these men are suddenly cast to one side, a new set of conceptions and motivates to dominate them. He goes, in fact, I've been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, I'm successful, but I've never been successful alcohol to your description. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected, for after all, I'm a good church member. This hope was, however, destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions are very good, in his case, did not spell the vital spiritual experience. And Carl Jung is saying there, while you have good religious ideas and beliefs and ideas and knowledge, those beliefs and ideas will not give you a spiritual conversion that the real alcoholic needs. If you are a real alcoholic, this book is written for you. Being a Sunday worshiper isn't enough. I'm not saying don't go there, don't do that. But if you wish to overcome alcoholism, We need deep-seated spiritual life centered, the principle centered in this book. Back to 93. We're almost done. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed in the practice the very precepts you know so well. We represent no particular faith nor denomination. We're dealing only with general principles common with most denominations. You know, something you often hear in recovery land is the big book is based on the Bible. And when someone says that to me, I tell them they come from the same place. If someone says if it's, oh, it's similar to Buddhism, they come from the same place. You know, these principles come from all sorts of religions and philosophies. You know, people have been making amends for thousands of years. Confession goes way back, and none of it's super original. What's original is step 4. And before we confess who we hurt and we resent, we write it down and we see why we were affected, why I had resentments, why I had fears, and I start to see the pattern. But I don't care how many times you have, you have confession, admitting, it. I guess what I'm saying, it's totally groundbreaking. You will not find it anywhere else. You know, you could do what you could do this so many times. Recovery. I'm sorry, going to meetings, but until you admit to your sponsor that has done this before, you know. I'm gonna close with this story when we're done. In 2001, I was a little over a year sober. I was introduced to a place called Diva Valley Ranch, and it's a great place to sponsor at. 75 men there sometimes, and they have to do the steps. A lot of them want to do fifth steps. It's magic ground, especially if there's 20 guys that are elders there that done their fifth steps. It's contagious. And I got a new sponsor, and he told me go there. And I went there 1 week, and I was blown away. 30 sponsors there, and they grabbed people, and I didn't get one that night, but I went back and I brought my friend with me. But for some, my friend didn't sponsor that much, and I was dying to find that watering hole. And we're at the place that night, and there's about 25 sponsors. And my friend and I introduced ourselves as sponsors. I turned and said, look at all these guys, those guys, here, that want sponsees. And he says, yeah, but look at all the sponsors. We're not going to get any. I said, dude, look at all those who want help. He says, man, there's too many sponsors. We're going in their territory. I said, dude, there's 70 guys here. And I always saw sponsees. He only saw sponsors. He was so focused on too many sponsors, and then it was then I realized that, there are two ways to look at sponsoring others. Focus on what I need to do, or only see what prevents me from doing so. And when that meeting ended that night, the book study ended. My friend walked out the door and didn't stand around for sponsees. I stood there and got a sponsee that night next to their sponsors who have way more time than I did. And I put my hand out and shook all their hands. The other sponsors didn't get mad at me or think I was cutting their territory. All I focused on was offering help. And my friend denied that to someone that night because he saw all the other guys he believed were in his way. Like, it was, my point is, don't be overwhelmed because there's so many people in the room. Raise your hand to sponsor. Keep raising your hand. And my first sponsee, at that place didn't do anything. I didn't give up. It took me 2 months to get the next person. In 24 years, I've probably heard 250 fifth steps to that place. And my friend wound up, slipping away and living in a dumpster behind Costco and passed away 5 years ago. Do what you need to do. Sponsor, never look back. And we cannot change the way other people think or what they choose, but we can always do our part. We can offer someone help, even if they refuse it, even if they don't want it. We always get paid spiritually. I always say you get paid spiritually, or you pay the price. Why? Because, we're willing. I always say heroes are not made. They're born out of a selfish person. By someone that become selfless. And I just said tonight, it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. The message is very simple. I had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and so can you. But I need to get back. So next week, again, Paige will be here as a special guest. She's got something cooped up she's gonna do. It's gonna be awesome. I will be hosting Thanksgiving, and we'll come back in a few weeks. We'll cover the rest of this chapter. I'm gonna stop the recording.